The Haiti-Earthquake is a disaster that occurred in Haiti on January 12, 2010, which caused a devastating impact on the country. The earthquake hit the area with a magnitude of 7.0, and as a result, about 300,000 people were left dead, 3 million were affected, and the country still suffers from its huge impacts. In this presentation, we will be discussing factors that affected the adjustments the people of Haiti made to this hazard prior to the event, and the responses that occurred after the event. First, we will talk about factors that affected the adjustments prior to the event. It is claimed by many researchers that the earthquake caused such damage to the Haiti populations, since correct measures were not taken to modify the vulnerability of the population, and not enough effort was put into preparing for the disaster, which would have minimized the impacts of this particular hazard if it was done right. So, what are the reasons that led the Haitian population to make the choice of being so unprepared for this disaster? One factor that led to the poor preparation for the event was the fatalistic viewpoint of the Haitians toward natural hazards. By being one of the most underdeveloped nations in the world, having an HDI of 0.49, the majority of the Haitians are poor and they lack education. Due to the environment they grew up in, and from the feeling that nothing is going to change in their lives, the Haitians often incorporate a fatalistic view of the world, where they accept events as intentioned by God or any other external powers. The approach allows the population to view hazards as something inevitable cast upon by supernatural powers, and make them believe that they can do nothing about it. Therefore, these people made a choice to make no adjustments prior to the disaster. However, not all of the population adopts this approach, and some try to avoid disasters by their own will. However, this attempt to make adjustments prior to the disaster is obstructed by their economical weaknesses. The average GDP per capita of Haiti is about $1,200, which is a significantly low number. Even the population might want to prepare for the disaster, their economic inabilities hinder their approach, and they had no choice in approaching this problem. Even though it seems as if Haiti had made a choice to not adjust their vulnerability against earthquakes, this might not always be the case. It is often not known that there are governmental requirements in Haiti to create buildings which are vulnerable against earthquake to a certain extent. However, due to bribery and corruption, shoddy construction plans, which do not follow these rules, are easily accepted by the government. This led to the ineffectiveness of modifying the vulnerability against a hazard by building regulations, and again made the choice of preparing for a disaster by living in less vulnerable areas and buildings a worthless and meaningless one. The government also were not able to take any effective methods in terms of education due to their general lack of experience of encountering an earthquake hazard. The last major earthquake that occurred in the region before 2010 was in 1946. Since the population over 80 years of age, who should have remembered this hazard experience, is only 0.6% of the total population, there was a general lack of experience and a sense of impending crisis, both within the government and the general mass. This also led to the decision of the government to make few adjustments towards this hazard.
There are 5 stages of response: rescue, assessment, coordination, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. The first, rescue, can take from 1 to 10 weeks. It was mainly affected by the lack of economic development in Haiti. The country had only 2 fire stations, their army had been abolished in 1995, and there were few hospitals and clinics. Haiti does have many self-help groups and NGOs, but most of them were based in the capital. One example is the NGO Doctors Without Borders. They had 3 aid centers in Port-au-Prince, but all 3 of them were destroyed during the earthquake, rendering their group needing more aid themselves than they were capable of offering. The next phase is assessment, which takes an estimated 6 to 10 weeks. There were 3 main sources of aid. The fastest aid came from the Dominican Republic. This was mainly because of the close proximity and the fact that they were worried about mass illegal immigration, which caused them to send food, water, heavy lifting machinery, and 8 mobile medical units with 36 doctors, in addition to opening their own hospitals to the victims of the earthquake. The aid from the UN was slower and, for the most part, insufficient. There was only enough food to feed 200,000 people out of the 3 million total people affected by the earthquake. International aid was the slowest because many countries were far away and many were hesitant to donate to a country already $1.5 billion in debt and with a corrupt, ineffective government. The third phase is coordination, which takes 1 to 10 weeks. This is an important step because it begins to deal with the long-term problems and possible solutions. The fear is that many different institutions might rush in and impose their own ideas and duplicate efforts. The main factor that affected this is the inequality in Haiti. Since there are so many disparities between the upper and lower classes, the distribution of aid is not always completely even. The fourth phase is rehabilitation, which has a much wider range of 1 to 52 weeks. This phase basically precedes the fifth phase, reconstruction. There were 250,000 residential buildings and 30,000 commercial buildings that were destroyed during the earthquake, in addition to roads, pipelines, and other infrastructure. It all needed to be rebuilt. The main factor that affected this phase was the lack of economic development in Haiti. Due to their poor record with financial management and the fact that this is the most aid-dependent country in the world, the recovery was severely slowed. Other factors include corruption, poor civil service, and mistrust between the donor and the community. This caused many organizations to bypass the government entirely, which only added to the administrative chaos. The final phase, reconstruction, can last anywhere from 1 to 40 years. It might take decades to rebuild a country from a disaster of that magnitude. Haiti's plan to rebuild had 3 focuses. 1. Infrastructure. 2. Civil services. And 3. Reducing soil erosion to make farmers more productive. This phase would be facilitated by a strong, dependable government and continued help in the form of material aid and experts on building earthquake-proof infrastructure to reduce the vulnerability of the population and to better protect them from similar disasters in the future. Additional factors that affect the responses to a hazard event include the magnitude of the event. For example, the Haiti-Earthquake of 2010 had a magnitude of 7.0 on the Richter scale, which is a large earthquake by any standards. Also, the predictability of an event is important. Earthquakes are random, even along seismically active faults, and they are hard to predict. Since there has not been an earthquake for many decades, it was not seen as a potent threat. This affected the perceived level of risk. The perceived level of risk was low because people were not seriously worried about earthquakes. Another important factor is the information available, for example through the media. There was little information available about earthquake preparation and safety procedure because of the low perceived level of risk. This lack of preparation was also affected by the limited knowledge of earthquakes and the high risk they posed to a population as vulnerable as Haiti was.